welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Aaron Klein. Aaron, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Guy.
All right, good to meet you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Likewise.
So Aaron got into no headphones running in 2023 unknowingly. It quickly transcended into a lifestyle choice and a form of self-therapy that has unlocked a lot of self-examination and has allowed him to explore his curiosities. Aaron lives an alcohol-free lifestyle, nearing 9 years as of January 24th of booze-free living. He's an advocate of healthy living and in general exploring curiosities that come up. One thing he preaches is this: never give up. All right, Aaron, welcome. So before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So if we go all the way back to my early life, originally I'm from the Bay Area, grew up in Sunnyvale, California, lived a little bit of time there until I moved up to Washington State in 1993. I was about 8 years old. And so I've been up here in Washington State ever since. My wife and I spent a small little portion of time, about 2 years, down in San Diego, but we moved back up to Washington in November of 2019.
Couldn't deal with the perfect weather.
No, couldn't deal with the perfect weather. No, couldn't deal with it. No, we missed home. We found out we were having a child. And so
nice.
We didn't have a support system down there like we do up here. So we just made the trek back home, and I bought a couple acres of property, and we now have our horses at our house. And so, yeah, we're up here in Port Orchard, Washington, which is in the general Puget Sound area, just across the bay from Seattle.
Sounds awesome. So your bio is interesting in that it is short, but it seems to me that there's a lot behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So how did this all start for you? This whole idea of no headphones running, that you would even make that kind of distinction, I think is very curious to me. But how did all this start for you?
So I've been a runner for a little while. I've ran a few half marathons and kind of hung up my shoes for a little bit after I had a knee injury, and just kind of had this false assumption that, running actually is bad for you. And so I fell back into it in 2023. Honestly, what happened was I was just having one of those days at work where it was just everything was compounding. I was just staring at my screen. I got to this mode where I just couldn't handle it. And so I shut my laptop, and I found myself downstairs putting my running shoes on, and I just left the house. I had no phone, no nothing. And I just went for a run. I ended up going for, I think it was like an 8-mile run, which is pretty crazy for me after not having run, more than 3 miles in probably the last year and a half or so since my last race and since my injury. And I just found myself going, and I was spent the time to just process stuff. And I was a crazy person out there. I was having conversations with myself. I was talking out loud. I was talking to this person that in that moment was kind of even me off, and, having these fake conversations. And I kind of just got done, and I went, wow, like I feel amazing. I feel great. And so like, I recognize, the feel good feelings that you generally get from running, but there was something more profound after that run specifically for me. And I made the connection of, okay, I think I was undistracted by podcasts, music. I was really like spending time with myself, which I don't tend to do often. And so I just got really curious about it. And I said, hey, a couple of days from now, I'm going to do that again and see what happens. And then I did it again and again and again. And it just kind of coalesced and turned into this thing for me. And then, I decided I'm going to run my first full marathon a few weeks after kind of getting back into running. Well, actually, it was going to be a half marathon, and then I kind of shared it with my wife, and because I'm a very suggestive person, she asked me the simple question of, "Hey, do you think you'll ever run a full marathon?" And so that kind of got bouncing around in my mind, and I came upstairs for a few hours and came back down and said, "Hey, I'm going to run a full marathon." And so I made this goal with myself to do all of my training without headphones, and so that's just kind of what it turned into. And yeah, that's the general.
So, in terms of self-exploration and curiosity, uh, what did you discover about yourself? Were there any, I guess, challenges? I mean, did you find that maybe you were, in fact, consciously distracting yourself, and this was something different, or how did that work for you?
Mm, that's a really good question. I found that I think that I don't want a blanket statement here and say all, but I think generally in society nowadays, we have a propensity to subconsciously distract ourselves. I think that in the world of social media and podcasts is another great one, which is kind of, it's kind of ironic that I'm even saying this while I'm talking on a podcast, but I would tend to find myself filling as much quiet time in my life as possible with something. And to me, when you pull back, like that is a form of distraction, right? Like you're trying to distract your mind because you're not wanting to be in the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I find this can be the simplest tasks of washing your dishes, or, you throw a podcast in because washing your dishes is not the most fun task to do. So, you find a form of distraction. And so I think generally as people, we are tending to shift more towards that modality of living. So it was a very eye-opening thing for me to just realize, like, wow, I do that a lot. So maybe I should just try to remove this from my life and see what happens and see what comes up. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of things that have transcended from it, which I wasn't expecting, and I think the other thing too is I went into it without any expectation. I was just thinking like, hey, just kind of pay attention as you're doing it and
Mm-hmm.
see what comes out. And the things that have come out have been pretty eye-opening to me.
Okay. Such as?
One thing that I have really recognized and I'm getting better at is paying attention to my body. And what that means is, if we're talking more specific to running, in the act of running is when I am doing a lot of my long runs without these headphones and without podcasts and music, I'm really able to focus on, if I'm starting to feel an ache or pain somewhere, I can correct it like that because I'm able to scan my body where I can kind of call that out and maybe make an adjustment or realize like, hey, I'm slouching a little bit here, or my back is a little bit too loose right now. Maybe I tighten my core or whatever. And that ache in my knee might kind of start to subside. And I realize like, oh, I wasn't engaged with my core. I wasn't fully in the moment and present with my body. And so I've also, in taking it outside of running in connection with my body is I've really been able to recognize the things that come up in my body that, so let me pause here for 1 second. And I'm sure you've read this book, but it was actually recommended by my therapist. The Body Keeps the Score. Have you?
Yeah,
fantastic book, amazing book. And, that was, I see a therapist every other week. And so one thing she had recommended was trying to pay a little bit more attention to my body. And so I had a tough time with it. I really had a tough time with it. And so I found that sitting with myself, doing something physical without the distractions has given me the opportunity to like really actually get in tune with my body. And so I'm finding now, I'm finding things like anger, frustration, sadness. I'm finding that stuff percolating in my body before it even hits my mind. And so I'm able to kind of recognize like, oh, I'm feeling this way. before my brain registers it, if that makes sense. So it's something that's allowed me the opportunity to really get in tune with things like my gut and my chest, and really know like, oh, anger's coming, or
Mm-hmm.
oh, I feel a sadness coming. It's not, it hasn't quite got there yet, but it's coming, because I know that this is the way that I feel when when I get in that space.
This is really interesting to me. Obviously, this whole topic of mindfulness, self-awareness is coming up for me.
Yeah.
In the bio, you mentioned drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, I just want to put that topic aside for a second, but one of the things that's coming up for me, Aaron, is this was running. You were obviously an avid runner. Was
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself a distraction?
Mm.
I mean, but not. I mean, not everything's a distraction, right?
Yeah.
It depends. But I'm just curious: was that in and of itself? Were you using that as a distraction?
Oh, for sure. And so I think it's kind of interesting you touch on that, because the reason I got heavily into running in the first place was 10 years ago, was my decision to run my first half marathon. And full transparency, I did it in kind of a last ditch effort for me to stop drinking alcohol, because I tried all these other things. And if anybody out there's listening and knows that tie and that issue that can prevail with alcohol use, is it's a tough thing to get over, and it's a tough thing to kick. And you can try all the things, but it's really hard if you have that in you. And so I kind of had this crazy thought of like, hey, maybe if I run this marathon and I just throw myself into running, I can distract myself enough to just not drink, right? And so I hold a lot of immense gratitude, because it worked. That is the one thing that finally got me to stop drinking. And so it was definitely a form of distraction, for sure. And I think that, like, yeah, you can use running as a form of distraction. Like, I mean, if you boil it
Anything?
doing anything and everything,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of what are you using it for. And to go back to, like listening to music and podcasts during certain activities, I just found like maybe I'm trying to avoid being with myself, and that's what it was for me.
So, what started the drinking? How did that? Why
Oh
did that
gosh.
continue?
I didn't, I started drinking a little later in my life compared to, I think, most, from what I hear from stories that I gather from people. I didn't drink until I was 19. And I had my first drink at 19. And then what happened was it just, honestly, the confidence it gave me, I just realized like, wow, it pulled me out of my shell, because I'm naturally kind of an introverted person. And so that kind of lingered. And then, the good side of it obviously always morphs into something darker and sinister. And so I just, years went by, and I just kind of found myself in this loop of getting into bad situations, and then recognizing that, 99% of the time alcohol was the catalyst, and to not be able to give that up is kind of very concerning. So that always kind of stuck with me throughout, of like, this is obviously an issue for me, because this thing in my life keeps showing up and keeps presenting bad outcomes, but yet I'm still doing it. And so, I went in and out of that whole battle of quitting drinking for a number of years, for sure, a number of years.
I mean, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, this to me is the story of this podcast. Here you are now at this point in your life where you've developed or uncovered the courage enough to, okay, look at yourself without distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And what got you to that point, or the impetus, was in part this drinking, and what that was covering up, in a sense, because for most of us, are the things we do to distract ourselves and to cover up there's something there. This is stuff
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
doesn't come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and that overcoming to me is very inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think, there was a lot of things in my childhood that definitely fueled that, later in my life that I realized I was burying subconsciously. And I've since worked on pretty extensively, and I've investigated and examined. And so, but the other, you know, honest fact is that my family is littered with alcoholics and addicts. And so I'm not, it's hard for me to play the genes are responsible for everything. And I think that the nurture nature, it's a blend of the two, in my opinion. And it's definitely, if you have it littered in your family and the cards are stacked against you in some component, then your likelihood of falling into that is pretty
Mm-hmm.
high. And,
Yeah.
but, in recognizing that though, I felt though that I had this very, very, honest and genuine, reliability to break that mold in my family. Right. Because if I could contribute anything in this world, it's really like helping others in some capacity. And if in any way, shape or form, like my family history and what I've done in comparison to the people that have come before me in my family. And this is not me bad mouthing my family in any way. I loved the members of my family and they're all very unique individuals. But if I can at least be known for the person that kind of broke that mold, like that's enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was in my family and it was there and it's a thing. And, ironically, my uncle, he was a huge, huge component of keeping me mentally fit and out of alcohol use, because he was a recovering alcoholic and he had quit. He had been sober for years, and
Mm-hmm.
I had the fortunate opportunity to get really close to him. Him and his wife, my aunt, moved from California to Washington, probably about 10 years ago. And so I got to spend time with him at the end of his life. He had since passed. He passed away, I want to say about 2 years ago, after moving back down to California to be with his family. But I had the chance to sit with him a lot in quiet reflection and have conversations that I couldn't really have with a lot of other people, because he had gone through it and he knew it. And it also definitely helped that he was part of the family and he understood, hey, his brother was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. So it's just,
Mm-hmm.
you can just keep going down the list and counting on your fingers. I can just keep going and going and going and going. And
Right.
so to have him in my life was just so impactful, and to be able to share stories with him. And it was, a blessing for sure.
When you're running and you're not distracting yourself, you're consciously not distracting yourself,
Yeah.
does stuff come up where you're like, holy shit, get back down there?
Oh,
you
for
know
sure. Every time.
what is that like?
Um, I
Well,
think
what stuff comes up where you're like, no, nope, ain't looking at that?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, there's definitely some things that come up in regards to the darker side of things. Um, a lot of it just might be my, just general, like how I might have responded to my kid in a situation, the day before will just come up out of nowhere. And like, I try to be very observant about those things when it happens. And I'm usually pretty quick to recognize, and if I make a poor parenting decision and I react poorly with my child, I'm usually pretty good about immediately addressing it and apologizing and talking to him. And he's granted he's 3.5, so he doesn't quite understand it yet, but it's still a hard thing for me, and I don't want to be reactive. But that sort of stuff will come up when I go on these runs, and I call back and think that I might have addressed it with a quick talk and apology, but it'll come up deeper because it'll kind of, why are you doing that? And, I'll just get into that mode of, just like negative self-talk, like, and I'll get down upon myself for that. And then, usually I find it in me to exercise some grace and realize that like I'm still not doing a bad job, and
Mhm.
parenting is hard. And so things come up, but I'm pretty good about tempering them. Um, but I find, I'll be honest, what comes up more than anything is kind of feelings of gratitude and love and peace. I'll be honest, like that comes up more than anything now when I go on these long runs. Is I'll kind of get overwhelmed by, feelings towards my wife, and I'm not a very vocal person. So I'm one to write, so my wife's birthday was yesterday, and I make her these cards every year, and they're kind of like my my way of, I guess, still being a kindergartner and making your parent happy birthday cards. And so I usually make her a card every year, and like I'm really good about writing how I
Mhm.
feel, but I'm just not good about vocalizing it. I'm working on that, but a lot of that stuff comes up for me when I'm out there running, as kind of feelings I might feel, gratitude and love for certain people. And so, yeah, I find more positive comes up than negative.
Let me take a pause right here. We're speaking with Aaron Klein. We'll be back in 2 seconds. What's it's interesting, Aaron. What strikes me about what you're saying is this whole topic is. I mean, it sounds to me uh, as if you're almost kind of rediscovering uh, who you are. With the alcoholism,
Yeah.
uh, coming out, emerging from that, almost like a rebirth. I don't want to be too dramatic here, but I mean, you're being conscious of sharing this process
Mm-hmm.
of not distracting yourself and running in order to kind of rediscover and share who you are. I think that takes a lot of guts. I think it takes a lot of courage. Are there challenges for this to you? I mean, is this? I mean, it's one thing to do it and to distract yourself, but again, you're making this conscious choice to do it undistracted.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever do it and say, you know, is it scary? Any part of it, or
Um, I think that I think that people in general, and I can only speak specific to myself here, so I'll let me just reframe that. For me, I think generally, like, if something is going good or well, I will have a propensity to try to talk myself out of it somehow. Like maybe, it's, I'm not deserving of this or whatever. So I'm every day I try to talk myself out of running, when I have it on my schedule. And that's the thing, like that's the misconception too, I think sometimes, is that like, um, you know, these things are easy, or this way of doing it has changed my life and made life easier. And like, that's not the case. Like, if anything, it's made it, if it's not the case, I don't want to sugarcoat all this stuff, because I think we tend to apply that through the lens of things in this self-help world we live in, which I think is all great, but like, not sometimes these things that we do don't make our lives easier. They make them more fruitful, right?
mm-hmm.
They make them more worth living. And that's what I'm finding. For me to get out and go on a training run, like, it's not easy for me to get out there and do it. I have to talk myself into do it, and I have to gear myself up. I'll find myself distracting myself all the time. I'll have a plan to go on a run in the morning at 6 o'clock on Saturday, and I won't leave till 6:45 because I've found 200 other things that I can do where it's like, come on, just get out the door. And
Right.
so I think there's that part of my brain that's like, hey, are you sure you want to subject yourself to this? So yeah, it's not easy. Um, but I think just doing it and just telling yourself to just do it and do it. And when you're in it, you're in it, right? You're just doing it. Um,
Do you see yourself as a somewhat different person from than when you were drinking?
oh, absolutely, for
In
sure.
what way? Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think I'm man, that's a very hard, that's a very tough question for me to answer, because it's been a long, so I have to like really put myself back in my shoes, over 9 years ago. Um, I think I have a propensity to recognize love more than I did before. I think that I have the ability to pull myself out of darker thinking quicker. I'm finding I'm having a little bit more grace with myself, um, and I'm able to kind of be less selfish. I still have selfish tendencies for sure, but I find myself less selfish and usually trying to make myself of service to other people in some way, shape, or form. And so, life, like I said before, like this life didn't get easier after I quit drinking at all. Like in fact, like it kind of got harder for quite a while um, because you pull back this blanket and this thing that's kind of been serving as a crutch in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts what it does is it slowly starts exposing all of these dark things that lie dormant that you didn't realize were things. And so I found myself, you know, maybe being more angry or more frustrated or more self-defeating talk. And so I had to really go through a pretty large learning curve in regards to how to live life again and essentially recover this person that I was, years and years ago. To the person I was when I was a kid, to the person I was when I was in high school. And I know that sounds weird to even like date high school as like a time where I'm like, yeah, things were pretty good, but like I didn't drink in high school. I didn't do drugs. I didn't do anything when I was in high school. And so I do think back to that time as like that was my baseline, right? That was my baseline. And so I'm getting back to my baseline and I'm finding that. And so yeah, me before alcohol and after, I think life was harder, but it's definitely now, like talking about it right now today, it's definitely better. I mean, way better and less harder.
So you have your website is The Daily Getaway, right? And you also have a newsletter, and we'll have these linked up
Yeah.
at Substack. What is your hope? I mean, what do you have a message, right? How would you articulate what your message is to people?
I think my message to people is just stay curious with yourself and explore yourself and just dive into yourself and don't give up, because like that's the one thing I could say about myself is, as many of these I would like to say I have more character defects than not, but I think like the one thing I can say in a positive perspective in regards to myself is that I don't give up, and I think none of us should ever give up. And so if things are tough in life, like just keep going, keep finding the thing. If you're on a path towards, your own uh, um, mindfulness journey or healing trauma or whatever it is, just like don't give up. Just keep trying things. Just keep trying things. Not everything's going to work, but I think that if you try 100 things and you find 2 that work, that's a win. And you'll find what works, and then you'll just keep doing it. And that's kind of what I've done is I just find the things that work, and then I just keep doing them.
Was your level of drinking? I mean, were you talking about every day? Were you talking about?
It was pretty much 4 to 5 times a week for a little while.
Like, would you say you were an alcoholic?
Oh, for
or
sure.
Are an yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I would like to say, and I know there's like that argument that like once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. And I honestly, I don't believe that because I don't feel like that is me anymore, but I'm still cautious. But yeah, I definitely was in it. A lot of it had centered around partying. It was a lot of social drinking. So it wasn't just myself. It was groups of people that were doing this 4 or 5 times a week. It was, parties at the houses all the time. And then what happened is I kind of had somewhat of a control on it to where it would become weekends. But I would always binge. I would always binge on the weekends, and I was a blackout drinker most of the time. And so that yeah, that became the weekends. And then what kind of started happening is I would kind of say, okay, hey, you're done. You're not going to drink till next weekend. And then Thursday might roll around and I'd find myself, just standing in front of the beer aisle. And you're like, how the hell did I get here? And then I'm having that conversation with myself of, okay, not tonight, don't do it. But then, next thing you know, you're ringing it up at the cash register. And like that whole recognition, and this is what came out a lot when I was training for that first half marathon. When I got to the end of that week of first training, I was said to myself, like, hey, you owe yourself a drink, right? You can celebrate, but something in me, whatever it is, some sort of divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, had enough strength in me to say, like, hey, put a lot of work in this week. One drink is not going to be one drink. It's going to be 5, 6, 7. You're probably going to black out. You're going to wake up like shit tomorrow. Then the whole thing's going to happen again. So just don't do it. And so that's as simple as that's the way it happened. And so, yeah, but I was definitely a multiple times a week drinker, and then it turned into a weekend, but it was always just too much consumption. And so, yeah, and plus the other thing, I was looking, at that time, my wife and I were starting our relationship, and we had just gotten married, and I kind of had this world that I was building too in a positive way. And I just kind of did this whole thing where I'm like, hey, I don't want to subject her to this. It's not horrible now, but like, I was just able to look in the future and like, no, like, I think I know where this is going to go. I don't want to get it there. Let's just not do that. If the day ever comes where I have kids, like, I don't want to subject my kids. Like, that's the saddest thing to me now that I have a kid is seeing children grow up in households with addiction. And it just breaks my heart. And I just knew, years ago, I was like, I don't want to be a part of that, and it was a part of my childhood. And so, yeah, I just was able to look in the future far enough to put a stop on it before it got to the point to where it was very detrimental.
So again, your newsletter is called The Daily Getaway. What are people going to get from reading your newsletter?
Yeah, so it has yet to launch. I'm still working on the template for it, but when it is finished, I'm hoping that what people can get away from it is, I'm going to share my running journey for sure. I'm going to share, some of the things that come up for me with no headphone running. I'm going to advocate for it, but I'm going to do it in the sense that like, hey, this helps me. You can try it on for size, but in no way, shape, or form, like this is not a cure-all for everybody's issues. That's just working for me. So I just want to spread the word. And then the other aspect of it really is, nutrition is a part of my lifestyle as well. And so I want to share some things that are working for me as it's centered around running. And then I'm a book lover and I love reading. I love reading fiction books. I love talking about them. So there's going to be a section in there where it's just I talk about books that I'm reading and hope that I can kind of spark people's love for fiction because I think it's coming back, but I think we've moved away from it over the years, and it's hard. Yeah. It's a thing. I said you can get a lot of help out of fiction too. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, when's that launch date?
I'm hoping in January of 2024. And okay. It'll be a monthly newsletter, so I'm not going to blow people's inbox up with the newsletter as I'm growing it. But also on my Substack, I put up posts periodically, and so if people subscribe to my Substack in general, they'll get notification of my posts, which are just, honestly, it's just whatever's on my mind.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll have those linked up here.
Thank you.
At the show notes page. You're welcome. The traumatherapistpodcast.com. Aaron, awesome, man. So inspiring. Appreciate you coming here. You're doing it.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on, and I'm super grateful to have this chance to talk. And anytime you get to have a real honest, open conversation with people is that's the stuff life is made of. So thank you.
I totally agree. That's why I invited you on here. Love to have you back in the coming year too.
That'd be
Keep
awesome.
up to
I'd
date.
love that.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.